Good afternoon, Senate institutions back in session. It's 2 o'clock. We are going to have a discussion about S9. And we have the honor of having the chair of government ops here to go down through the bill. So welcome.
Thank you. So S9, hi everyone. S9 is a bill about the authority of the state auditor to examine the books and records of state contractors. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on the sort of genesis of the bill and why it happened. In April of 2022, there was a state Supreme Court case, Hoffer v. OneCare, that was brought about because the state auditor had requested records from the OneCare Accountable Care Organization that has a contract with the state, and OneCare refused to provide the records that all of the records that were requested, and the lawsuit ensued, and it was appealed and went to the state Supreme Court. That said that the auditor essentially said that the auditor was not an authorized representative or agency of the state, as is mentioned in attachment C, which I'll talk about later, and I'm sure some of these other people in the room are even more expert on it, that talks about who can audit the records of a contract with the state. The court said that the scope of the auditor's authority is to be defined by the legislature, and that literally says the legislature knows how to provide the authority sought by the auditor when it chooses. So this bill would provide the authority for the auditor to audit certain contracts with the state. And so just the court was very clear that it's up to the legislature to provide that authority. State contract audit procedures, already state contracts and the books, records, et cetera, of state contracts are audited. And prior to this court case, they were audited by the auditor in many cases. But this case said actually, no, the auditor can't. So many of the contractors have already in the past provided records to the auditor for audit. And these provisions are laid out in Bulletin 3.5, the procurement and contract procedures of the state, specifically attachment C in section 13, which says that the records described shall be made available at reasonable times during the period of the agreement and for 3 years thereafter, or for any period required by law for inspection by any authorized representative of the state or federal government. So all contracts are required right now to be audited or can be audited, and prior to the Supreme Court decision, in fact, were in many cases audited by the auditor. State agencies that issue contracts can audit the performance of these contracts, and some contracts are also subject to federal audit requirements, depending on what the contract is and the funding source. In FY21, the state issued more than $1 billion in contracts, which is nearly 14% of the state budget. So contracts are a significant part of the state budget, and without the ability to have the state auditor audit them, that is a large part of the state budget that is not accessible for the state auditor to audit. And so the provisions of the bill are that it explicitly provides the auditor authority to examine the records, accounts, books, papers, reports, and returns related to the performance of a contract with the state. And I want to point out that the list of things, records, accounts, books, papers, reports, and returns, is the same language that's used for every other place where the auditor is given authority to audit something. So it matches the statutory language that's in statute currently for the auditor to be able to audit state agencies and departments, sheriff's offices, county, municipal, school district, all of that. So that language is the same as it is everywhere else. The auditor performs, and I highly recommend you talk to his office. I don't want to speak for his office, but the type of audits they perform are performance audits. And so as we heard some concerns from people, we added to make sure that it was clear that the audits would be as related to the performance of the contract. So it's not just anything, you can't just look at any records, books, et cetera. They have to be related to the performance of the contract with the state. And as I said before, this mirrors the same information that's already in there. The bill also explicitly states that information that is not otherwise available through the Public Records Act would remain exempt from the Public Records Act. So there was some concern that if private entities provided records to the state, that those records would become public records. And so we explicitly state in the bill that any records that were otherwise confidential would remain confidential. And that includes tax returns, personnel records, trade secrets and confidential business records, records related to contract negotiations, and medical records as covered by HIPAA. So anything that's confidential would remain confidential. And we made that explicit, even though it's already sort of implied through the Public Records Act. And we worked with both Becky Wasserman and Tucker Anderson, who's the expert on the Public Records Act, to make sure that we had language that was compatible with the Public Records Act in the bill. It also adds the auditor to the provision maintaining the confidentiality of certain financial records. And this we included after hearing from Chris Delia from the Bankers Association that there are federal requirements for banking and financial institutions that prevents them from providing records without explicit confidentiality provisions. So we added language that was suggested by Chris to cover that. And that's true in other parts of the statute that deal with financial records. It also, the bill requires that the auditor be added to Bulletin 3.5, which is the bulletin I mentioned to you earlier about contracts, as an authorized representative of the state. So again, if you're curious about the sort of process that the auditor goes through when he audits records, I would encourage you to talk to his office, but they do operate under a professional standards manual, which includes the generally accepted government auditing standards. And they are, they have a policy for maintaining confidentiality records and for responding to Public Records Act requests. So if you look at the bill, and Becky can sort of walk you through it in more detail, paragraph 13 on page 2 adds the discretion to examine the books, records, accounts, books, papers, reports, and returns. That's again the same language for all of the areas where the auditor has authority to audit things. And then you'll see that on line 9, 8 and 9 as relevant, that are relevant to the performance of that state contract. And then the subdivisions that are the next place, lines 11 and 12 that are not otherwise available to the public are exempt from public inspection and copying under the Public Records Act. So this provides an exemption to the Public Records Act so that these records are not made public. And then the section 3 is the exception, is the language about the bulletin 3.5. And section 4 is the language about the financial records for the banking association, the banking institution. So we heard from a number of witnesses, including obviously the auditor's office, our 2 legislative council attorneys. We heard from the General Contractors Association, from BGS, from the Agency of Transportation, from the Hospitals Association, from the Bankers Association, And I don't have the list with me.
That's fine.
But we heard from a number of witnesses and we made changes to the bill based on the concerns that we heard.
Good.
And this also, the state auditor authority to audit contracts is a common authority that's used in other states. And many states permit their auditor to audit state contracts, including the state of Massachusetts, which is a state that many of our state contractors also contract with.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And we'll continue on.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So because we have so many people here, we're just gonna go around and introduce ourselves so everybody knows who everybody is. And so, why don't we start right here?
Dave Mazza, Senator Grand Isle, Colchester District.
Wendy Harrison, Wyndham.
Deborah Demore, Director of Purchasing and Contracting for the Department of Buildings and General Services.
Jennifer Fitch, Commissioner of BGS.
John Kelly, Principal Assistant ADS.
Denise Rhodes, Deputy Secretary of ADS.
Sean Naylor, Secretary, Agency Digital Services.
Douglas Farnham, Deputy Secretary for the Agency of Administration.
Becky Wasserman, Legislative Counsel.
I'll go to the screen.
Eric Philcorn, BGS. Sorry.
Irene Renner, Chittenden North.
Brian Collmore, representing the Rutland District.
Linda Lehman, Committee Assistant.
And Russ Ingles, Senator Essex District. So we'll just jump right in. So sometimes you get these things that you really just don't really know much about, then all of a sudden your phone blows up. And that's what kind of happened here. This come across from government operations, and this things went wild. I was getting called over and over and over by contractors, and worried about the process, and worried about bidding again, and worried about getting audited by the state, and worried about overreach and all of that stuff. Those are the words that were repeatedly over and over and over used. So I've tried to keep all of who we had coming in specific to what institutions deals with, which is, as we just heard, 14% of all monies expended by the state is done through a bid process. So knowing full well that we don't have enough bidders now, and that we have a supply chain issue, really kind of worried about the amount of dollars that we have or don't have, and how it's going to affect any of the processes that we use. One of the, we could have probably had everybody as well into our transportation committee, but seeing how we have the chair that sits here, we thought that, maybe we could just listen to this portion of it, to see if we need to get AOT in there as well, if we had some concerns. So I'm going to just ask the question, is this going to hurt the bidding process? And whoever wants to step up, or whoever wants to lead the presentation.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask a background question
Yes.
about how this came to be? And I think you would probably have the best chance of answering it. So with the Supreme Court decision, it sounded as if the auditor was no longer, was an authorized representative, a term, something like that?
So Becky Wasserman, Legislative Counsel. The case that you just heard about, it's not that the auditor was deemed no longer an authorized representative. It's just that the in this particular case with the contract between OneCare and DEPA, there were two relevant contractual provisions that allowed for an authorized representative of the state to be able to conduct this audit and request records. One was in the contract itself, and then one is part of attachment C, which is part of the state standard provisions for contracts that are attached to every state contract. And so when the court looked at the language in those contractual provisions that said that an authorized representative could conduct this work, they went through an analysis to say, well, is the auditor considered an authorized representative under this contract? And so they came to the determination that the auditor was not an authorized representative of the state for the purposes of doing an audit. And that was in part due to the fact that the auditor's authority under statute specifies that the auditor can conduct audits of departments and entities of the state, but does not say that the auditor's office can do these audits of contractors with the state. And there was nothing else in the contract that specifically named the auditor as an intended third-party beneficiary of this contract. So that's where the court came out to say, we don't read this to say that the auditor is an authorized representative under these contractual provisions. There are other statutory provisions that do sort of explicitly give authority to the auditor to do audits of other non-state entities or other entities like related to the state. And so the court said, the legislature knows how to give this authority in statute when they want to. So, if sort of speaking to the legislature to say, if you want the auditor to have this authority, you can always change statute to clarify that.
And that's why we're here. That's my understanding, right?
Well, while we're here.
Someone wanted to.
So there was a bit
Go
there,
back
yeah,
and
there was
create that.
a request to essentially do what the court said, or the court sort of indicated that this could be changed if the legislature wanted to change it. So there was a proposed language to make that change.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
And so I kind of, and really just to really frame it again, why we're here, that avenue got us here, but why we're here is to fully understand whether this bill that looks to become law is going to affect on how the bidding process works in the state of Vermont. That's where I kind of keep the frame of this, because that's what the purview of what institutions is. So go ahead, sir.
For the record, Douglas Farnham, Deputy Secretary for the Agency of Administration. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In my opinion, this bill would damage the bidding efforts, the competitive procurement efforts of the state of Vermont. I think there's a lot of things here that this might be a mix of my opinion, but I'll give a little bit of background that can help maybe flavor that opinion. Secretary Clauser has tasked me as the deputy with oversight of 3.5. So any waivers, any contracts that require AOA review and approval, I handle all of those. So I sign probably about 4,000 contracts a year, maybe more. Maybe when you count waivers, 5,000 to 6,000 documents that I'm reviewing, signing, making sure the state of Vermont is following our procedures. So at a high level, I would say I'm very familiar with how we are enforcing 3.5, where we are giving exceptions, and where we generally tend not to give exceptions, right? So I've seen, especially around our standard terms and conditions, our attachment C, that's often an area where we have to go through significant negotiations with vendors just to come to a place where they are comfortable working with us. And we need the flexibility to be able to do that. If this was in statute, we would not have the ability to negotiate that particular element and make sure the situation lines up. I view this particular bill as kind of like casting a net to troll the ocean, catch one fish, right? We had one incident that was high profile recently. All of our other contracts, we keep talking about this one incident. This is not a systematic failure or problem with our process in general. It's based off of one incident. And I think we like to work with the state auditors. I see great value being a financial person and the work that the state auditor performs. But I do think that in creating this requirement, which yes, some other states that are much larger than us have similar requirements. I did have a chance to look quickly through the list the state auditor provided. Many of those are much, much larger than us, have much more bargaining power. And we cannot enforce the same terms as California or New York. We're just not in the same position as them. So I think Vermont, we have to rely on Vermont being friendly and flexible. And of course, we need to make sure we're doing our due diligence and getting the best value out of that money as possible. But when we have terms that could, I mean, the interpretation of directly related to the performance of the contract would then be up to the auditor, and he could interpret that in a number of ways. He could interpret it very differently than you or I would. So once you've kind of opened that up, I could see contractors being very nervous about having that door open to them. I think the auditor does great work and is focused on auditing the state of Vermont and auditing the state of Vermont instrumentalities or statutory creations, primarily government auditing, and exposing our private business partners to government auditing. I don't know is a very friendly step. Personally, I'd love to see Vermont contracting more with smaller vendors, with BIPOC-owned businesses. And this type of provision is going to scare a lot of smaller businesses and BIPOC-owned businesses away. So I do think that there would be a very real impact on people's willingness and desire to come work with the state of Vermont by making this change.
So XYZ company gets a contract with the state of Vermont, they do the work, they fulfill it. It gets down to the work is done, everybody's happy. Is there some type of audit that goes on at some point? What happens with that process? Who makes sure that that process works? That the job was done, everything was done, everybody's happy, we're gonna pay them. Where are we in that process? How does that work now before this?
So right now, the programs that are engaging directly in that contract have responsibility to review the invoices, to randomly select backup documentation, make sure that contractor delivered the services and deliverables that the state has paid for. And then as part of the single audit, if any federal funds are involved, those contracts will be sampled by through the state auditor's office by their contract auditor, and will be sampled to make sure that our processes for contract oversight are appropriate and complete. And I think that is the role of the state auditor in the contracting process, not necessarily to dig into individual contracts themselves, but to make sure we as a state are overseeing our contracts properly, and we're making sure, because yes, we shouldn't be just have no oversight, right? BGS contracts, they should be running those contracts, and the state auditor should be making sure they're doing a good job of overseeing those contracts. But digging into tax returns or other things is too intrusive, and it's unnecessary, because we're not paying for the entire operations of those businesses. We're paying for paving, we're paying for IT systems, we're paying for a building, we're paying for a specific deliverable, and that's the item that should be validated and vetted, not the overall financial position, the behind the scenes, the operating practices of that business that we're working with. So I think we need to keep it at that first layer, and that first layer is very important. And I do think the auditor has very, very important responsibilities there. And we've always cooperated with that type of review of our contracts. If you're talking about invoices, payroll stubs, anything to show that the state was given the product that we paid for and that we made sure it was the right quality. I know BGS tests asphalt and AOT, so we do a lot in quality control, and I think that's the most important element, making sure that taxpayers' dollars are spent wisely.
So why would we want to go deeper than that? If we're happy with the job, we're happy the way it happened, everybody's gotten paid, on we go. You have the right to go back for 3 more years to make sure that everything's all good. Why do we want to go deeper? Why would we want to go deeper than that? What benefit do we have after we've awarded that contract, the work's done, we paid the contract? Why would we want to go deeper?
In my opinion, Mr. Chair, we shouldn't go deeper. If a review of a program and a contract finds out that the state overpaid for a particular service or deliverable, that is a finding on the agency administering that program. That is a performance finding where the state needs to improve, not the contractor. This is commerce, this is a contract. So the obligation to make sure we get our money's worth is on the state programs and the state agencies and departments, and we should not be pushing it onto the contractors. And that's what I fear this language accomplishes.
Question.
So Doug, at the moment, if I'm understanding, the situation is sort of between employer and an employee for a specific project that needs to get done. And as long as both sides have agreed to the terms and that the work done matches up with what was expected to be paid for and the product delivered is at the quality that was expected, we're done.
Yes,
And so there wouldn't be any, I mean, this seems like a real expansion of entities that we're not dealing with right now, except on that first level of, here's what we need done, here's what we're gonna pay for it, go ahead and do it, and we'll take a look at it after, and if everything's good. In other words, private business is not necessarily part of the process at the moment in terms of looking deeply into what's going on. You mentioned the agencies would be subject to review after if something didn't come up to snuff, right?
right. It's my understanding that the state auditor has the authority to request any documents from an agency related to their oversight or administration of a contract. And if they fail to provide those, then they would be violating statute.
Okay, thank you.
So why was this bill created? What caused this bill to be created? Is it some auditor or who wanted this bill? Where'd it come from? I guess that's what I'm saying. Anybody know?
My understanding is it came from the auditor himself, after the one care decision was made and that the auditor had approached government operations to push this bill forward. That's where my understanding is. And seeing some heads nodding in the direction of looking around the room, that I would say that's probably pretty fair. I haven't seen fear like this from grown people in a long time. And so I asked everybody to come in that could be fairly well protected, but private companies that have contracted with the state are very fearful to come in because they just feel like there could be some harm caused to them later on in the process. I don't want to put anybody on the record as far as that, but I do see AGCs in the room. And you had said that you were thankful for some provisions that had been made in this when you were across the hallway in the government operations. Has anybody expressed any fear to you as far as anything about this, about whether they would choose to bid or not bid without, naming any companies or anything? Have you got any feelings for that?
So for the record, my name is Matt Musgrave with Associated General Contractors, and it's a difficult question to answer because if I was to answer in the affirmative or the negative, that could potentially indicate that we were colluding amongst companies, which is illegal, and we don't do that. So related to people telling me whether or not or should they bid is not an answer that I have. What I will say is that we've had conversations.
Sorry.
We're getting cozy.
That's five.
Yeah.
I can only imagine that.
Call them Valentine's. I call that.
So pertaining to the bill, and I've prepared some testimony in writing as well as some examples. I know we have a commissioner from BGS here who can explain their bidding process a little bit. I brought some data in relation to the Agency of Transportation bid work that we do. And when we first saw the bill come through, we just believed it was absolutely a terrible bill. It didn't seem to have any boundaries or guardrails around it. The challenge that we had with it wasn't that there was an agent of the state, regardless of who it was, because it won't always be Mr. Hoffer. It will someday be someone else. But so we're used to this bid and audit process, and we've really drawn the line in the sand. And I drew the line in the sand in the Government Ops Committee of what we believe would be the information where we would say, no, this is performance of our contract. And by putting that language in, performance of the contract, it helped ease some of those challenges. What it didn't do is prevent any litigation in the future, because as Mr. Farnham has just mentioned, the auditor may perceive that the production of the contract may be different than what I say it would be. In that case, we would say you'll have to bring us to court for that. So we do feel better about the language. I'm happy to share with you what we already do. I've sent some documents into your committee chair as well.
Questions?
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we're talking about construction contracts primarily, but this would, I mean, is our service contracts part of this?
Yeah.
Right, so, and this is a change in authority in terms of service contracts? I guess I'm just still trying to figure out,
Yeah, so this,
like, what was the case before the Supreme Court decision? How did service contracts get reviewed, and did the auditor have authority to review service contracts? Or
so this
construction
is expanding the auditor's authority in statute to conduct an audit of any contractor with the state in, related to the performance of the contract. So there's a limitation on there. So it wasn't explicitly in statute before that the auditor could conduct an audit and request the books and records of the contract with the state. So it is an expansion in that sense. I think the Public Records Act does play a role in what the auditor could have gotten prior to this change in statute. So I don't want to say that it was impossible for the auditor to have obtained some of this information prior to this change in statute. And you might want to hear from Tucker, who is the attorney in our office who deals with the Public Records Act. But I think there might be an argument for that one care in particular because of its role with the state would be considered sort of an instrumentality of the state under the Public Records Act, such that they would be required to provide this information anyway. The auditor requested the information based on the terms of the contract and the terms of his statutory authority. I think the case might have been, the court sort of said if you had been making a Public Records Act request, we're not looking at whether or not you would have received this information under that other law. So there's sort of another dimension to what information could have been available to the auditor without this specific change in authority.
Thanks. Yeah, and I wish I knew more about that case. But just one thing I want to bring up, this isn't just construction contracts. Performance contract or service contracts could be 10 years. So it isn't just they build something, we like it, they're gone, and then we move on. I mean, voting equipment. And there are cases where it's important that the company be solid financially because we want their services to continue. I mean, we provide services through contractors like health providers. Okay.
I'm here for the healthcare provider.
Yeah, and I would hope that it looks like we're kind of picking at what is private to the company. I'm sure there's other examples. So if this does go forward, I think we should have just general language. Like, for example, telephone companies can't give you the phone numbers and calls unless you have a court order, I believe. But I mean, there are other limitations on data. So I think there should be a general protection of that information, not just the ones we've noted so far.
Yeah, so the language is general. It's not
Is it? Okay.
specific to construction or any, it's all contractors, but the language actually does do that. So it does say that, it does create like an exemption in the Public Records Act to say if this information was otherwise confidential and then the auditor is requesting it, it's not like someone could then make a Public Records Act request of the auditor to obtain that confidential information. So it is keeping confidential information confidential.
But it can still dig deeper as far as into, normally the way that the law is now, they would have no business going in as deep as what this allows, going to allow. Is that a fair statement?
So I think I think maybe the auditor might be better placed to speak to what their office would normally be requesting, and if it is something in addition to what is contemplated under this information. I mean, I can say that the OneCare case that this came out of had to do with payroll records that the auditor was requesting. So that, is an example. I mean, there's tons of exemptions under the Public Records Act, like tax returns and things, personnel records and things like that, if somebody requested those would still, there could still be an exemption asserted for that document. But whether or not the auditor, I guess I don't know that I can answer that it's going deeper than what the auditor would normally be requesting in conducting an audit.
Devin Green, I'm with the Vermont Association of Hospitals and Health System. We represent all of Vermont's hospitals. They're all nonprofit. I'm here on behalf of a lot of healthcare providers. Jessa Barnard from Vermont Medical Society, Helen Laban from Vermont Healthcare Association, Julie Tesler from Vermont Care Partners, Mary Kay Bowman from Bi-State Primary Care, Patrick Gallivan from the Vermont State Dental Society, Jill Mazza-Olson from the VNAs of Vermont, Stephanie Winters from the Vermont Academy of Family Physicians, and the American Academy of Pediatrics Vermont chapter. And that's it for the healthcare providers. But it's a healthy list, and we are all concerned because of the impact that this could have both on the services side of things or also on the construction piece. One thing that hospitals are dealing with right now is we are over capacity. We have seen in the last couple of weeks 3 to 5 ICU patient beds available. We've seen hospitals over 100% capacity. It's been really concerning. And we would like to have the ability to create greater capacity faster. I know the state has been working on this. They've been really helpful in trying to find buildings for patients who don't have a place to go after they receive their hospital care. But we are worried that this will scare off bidders, and it's really needed right now. Additionally, healthcare providers subcontract, right? So the Vermont Medical Society, they have little Department of Health grants that they give to pediatricians. Vermont hospitals are working with homeless shelters to try to provide medical care in homeless shelters, and we're subcontracting to all of them. I don't think any of these little organizations understand that they may be subject to an audit request through these grants that we're providing. I want to be clear that what the auditor asked for in the case were all of the payroll records, not just some payroll records, but the payroll records of every employee. He asked for all the W-2 records of all the employees, all the 1099 records of all the employees, and all the documents around payroll adjustments.
That's broad.
Which is really broad. And I don't think nurses are signing up for that when they take a job with one of our organizations. I don't think these other, smaller nonprofits that we're dealing with are signing up for releasing that sort of information. And so we have a lot of concerns here. And also, we're worried about creating parallel processes, right? Right now, the auditor can go through the contracting agency, they go through us. Now we'll be creating 2 tracks where we have to answer to the contracting agency. We will also have to answer to the auditor potentially. both could have different definitions of what performance is and what's required under that, which just creates administrative burden and waste. So we're also concerned in that area as well. Finally, we really appreciate the language around exempting any records collected from the Public Records Act, but we are still concerned about HIPAA-related records. So even if they're not public, there are still a lot of requirements around housing those records and what you do with that very sensitive information, and we would want to see a plan from the auditor about how that's going to happen. So those are our concerns for now, and happy to answer any questions.
The problem we're trying to resolve, I would like to know what the major problem that we're trying to resolve. Why are we going this route? What has caused this to be built?
I think Deputy Secretary Farnham has probably said it best, is that there was one fish that they were casting a net for, and instead it cast a net for everybody.
The thousands that we do.
Right. I mean, 14% of our monies that we spend is going to be affected in this process. I just want to kind of move around. I appreciate that everybody's come here, and maybe some people are going to be reactive to words that are said, but I just want to go around the room and just make sure that everybody here, if you have something to say. Secretary Naylor.
Thank you. For the record, Sean Naylor, Secretary of Digital Services. Our experience is a microcosm of what Deputy Secretary Farnham laid out, right? And our concerns are right in line with how you started this off. In the technology space, we're seeing this, I would say, consolidation in the list of vendors willing to partner with us getting shorter. What we're really seeing is, even just with our current terms and conditions that we have to negotiate, we're seeing 6 months when we start adding in things like how much do we negotiate for cybersecurity coverage and things like that. So when we don't have the luxury of being New York, Massachusetts, California, where our buying power requires people to have a seat at the table to work with us. We're a small state that has to kind of, we are desirable to work with because we're flexible in the technology space and we can be pretty adaptive in what we do. And so therefore, that's what is our appeal. But our fear is this is going to be another piece that's going to filter out some of the best that could work with us. And if we see that, that means that the state of Vermont could be limited to only technologies from the companies that have the largest legal departments to make sure that whatever happens doesn't adversely impact them. And, we're seeing that now, and to Deputy Secretary Farnham's point about, small businesses and stuff, all too often, we're seeing the ones that can come to terms with us is the one with the largest legal department. And working through that process and getting to the point by which we can get to a contract. And in our role, in our expectations, we want to be able to deliver services to Vermonters as efficiently as possible. And in order to do that, we should have available to us the suite of technologies that's best at that time. And so if this in any way could limit our access, that's concerning, right? Because that means we're always going to be working from a position of behind. And when you look through like the states that have this, I think it's 16, so we're talking less than a third of the states in the country. The smallest is like Iowa, right? And even their buying power is significantly more than what we have. And the ones that I sampled don't go into things like tax returns. So I mean, these are areas that when we look at and what it says contractors and subcontractors, I believe in the proposed bill, we do a lot of purchasing through resellers. So does that reseller agreement constitute like a contractor subcontractor? So where does it stop as far as how far they can reach into the supply chain to say that now is, we want their payroll records or these records to do an audit? And I feel that one of the reasons the Agency of Digital Services was created was to have consistent oversight in the delivery of technology projects. And I think for us, that's where the focus and the benefit will be for Vermonters, is to make sure that the auditor's office is looking over our shoulder to make sure we're doing what's in the best interest of the state, but not creating a situation by which we will have limited access moving forward.
Secretary, you ask for a job to be done, it's done, it's completed on time, whatever, you go through your process, everybody's happy, you write the check to them or have the check written. You probably never even met the president of the company. Do you have any need to see that president's tax return?
I do not. I don't look at our role as worrying about the profitability of a company. Our role is to make sure we get the best value for Vermonters. And so we're doing that up front when we're doing our contract selection and when we're negotiating. That's where we're looking and worrying about the viability of the company we're doing business with. We don't want to start down the path and then find out afterwards, right? That's the work that we do as proper due diligence on the front end of selecting partners to work with.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just want to build on something Secretary Mailer said. I participated in one negotiation where there was a piece of software that was excellent for Vermont. The vendor refused to sign the standard grant terms, but the risk or the standard contract terms, sorry, they were not happy with elements in attachment C. Basically, from their perspective, they were selling us a piece of software and they weren't going to agree to all these conditions just to sell us a piece of software that was kind of prepackaged. So over the course of 4 months, we negotiated acceptable terms that protected the state and got us that piece of software that the business users were kicking down our doors for. The ADS said, yes, this fits into our environments. This is a good piece of software. This is good for the state. If this provision had been in there, I'm extremely doubtful that that particular vendor would have signed that contract. They would have walked away, in my opinion.
So you were able to kind of work around some of the things to keep everybody comfortable enough to get what you're looking for, but you still felt you had enough protections in there. It just worked. The process worked, and
And I would also, sorry, I would also add that although he's the Secretary of Digital Services, our institutions, our buildings, our structures, our daily life is becoming more and more ingrained with our information technology. So I would say that Secretary Naylor's world does overlap actually pretty firmly with the institution's world. Our buildings need these technologies to operate effectively.
Right, exactly. As we see all the complicated entry systems that we have and all of that stuff, they're all talking to one another and making sure that that person getting in there is that person. So
absolutely.
We don't, a perfect example is we would not want to be in a position where the best heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system for a facility cannot be purchased or can't be used because they don't agree to our terms, right? And so then we're either compromising energy efficiency, whatever it is, right? And all those things are highly integrated today. So that is where our concern sits.
Deb DeMore? Oh, over here, sorry.
Do you want me to jump in?
Yes, I do, yes.
Okay, so for the record, my name is Jennifer Fitch and I'm the Commissioner of Buildings and General Services. So I think there's really 2 points to make here. If you refer to the statutory language and the statutory duties of the auditor himself, it specifically mentions departments, institutions, and agencies of the state, right? So one of the questions we've had today is, how does this proposed language differentiate from the power he has today? So if we imagine the auditor is here in the state, right? We talked about agencies, departments, and institutions of the state, right? We're one layer. He wants to go one layer deeper than that and be able to go right to that next layer without even including the agency, department, or institution that has that contract and go directly to that provider, right?
So there's not a cause that makes it, there's not a cause or effect that would want him to do that. He can just do that because that's what he wants to do. There's nothing that caused him to go down to that other layer.
So if you look at the statutory authority of the auditor today, it really talks about the public, right? Public sector. That's us, that's BGS, that's AOA, that's ADS. So at any point in time, and we were subject to an audit, I came in 2017, and we were subject to an audit on several of our contracts with several of our vendors for construction, right? And he was able to audit any records that we had, right? And anything that was associated with the performance of those contracts. So we had the ability through BGS, right, to get that additional information related to performance. So that's the second thing that I think it's really important for this committee to understand, right? Where if you read the language, this is around performance. So let's say I'm looking at your window there that's broken. Let's say I put out, which is unfortunate, I just noticed it now. I'll be putting in a operations and maintenance. It's going to love me today. But so let's say I want to put out a bid to repair your window, Okay?
That'd be fun.
So I'm gonna craft a request for proposal. I'm going to put it out on the street, and I'm going to hope that several people respond to that bid. And inside that contract, there will be specific requirements in terms of the glass type that we want them to use, in terms of when they can replace it, because I don't want them replacing it while you're in session, right? So they either have to do it at night or on the weekends, so it doesn't impede or interfere with your work, for example, right? And I'm gonna have a date at which the work needs to be done by. Okay, so I hire my contractor, I enter into a contract agreement, it has those performance criteria inside the contract. It's my job as an agent of the state to make sure that that contractor is meeting all the performance criteria in that contract, right? So I'm gonna have someone come and inspect your window at some point, and hopefully the work has been done by the time that I said it was, and hopefully I don't come in here and you say, gee, he came in today while people were testifying to fix my window, right? So again, this is about performance, it's not about financials. So what that means is, I'm gonna put that bid out, and while we are not a low bid state, so long as contractors are meeting the requirements of the contract or the bid, right, I can enter in, and typically speaking, in most cases, I'd say 80% of the time, we go to the low bidder, right? It doesn't matter to me what it cost him for materials to buy the glass, let's say, or to hire that person to come in and fix your glass for you. What I care about is, did the work get done? Did it meet the performance criteria within the bid amount that that contractor bid on? That's what I care about. And I'm protecting the interests of the taxpayer dollars, right? Because I'm going through that competitive bid process. I'm making sure that their bid is compliant. And then I'm going to make sure that they do that work in accordance with the performance criteria in the contract. So again, when we start talking about financials, it opens the door. And is it in statute that he can reach in and have all these things to do with financials? He certainly can. But again, that's based on the public sector, not the private sector. And that's the difference in this particular situation. So again, it's really expanding his authority. One, go one layer deeper. Two, go around the public sector here, so the agency, department, or institution, as is written in statute. And the third piece is to then go and add those financial components, that unless for some reason there are financial performance criteria in the contract, other than you said you would do the work for $1,000, let's say, to repair your glass, right? I'm accountable. I am BGS, because I'm the one that holds the contract to make sure that your window gets repaired for the dollar amount that was inside the contract. Now, if that contractor comes back and says, gee, you know what? I can't repair it for $1,000. I'm going to go back to him and I'm going to say, okay, Mr. Contractor, you bid to me. Why can't you repair it for $1,000? And at that point, he's going to have to give me additional compelling information for me to say, okay, you know what, $1,500, because you provided me the additional information. But so long as he can repair it for the amount he told me he could, then I don't need to see the financial information, because it was a competitive bid process. So it really does expand his authority in statute.
The person that just fixed the window, do you care if they have a condo in Vail, Colorado?
I do not.
Okay.
And the final thing, I just want to echo I think the one theme that you've heard here. We are a very small state. We talk about supporting Vermont's economy all the time, right? And that's an area where it's hard to live in Vermont. It's not affordable to live here, right? So again, we're trying to promote small businesses and small companies. We're trying to diversify the best we can. It is already really, really, really hard to contract with the state of Vermont. And I know a ton of vendors out there. There's one that sits in the House Institutions and Corrections Committee that does not work for the state and is a vendor, because that person thinks that contracting with the state of Vermont is too difficult already, and so chooses not to bid on any work for the state of Vermont. Do we really want to make it even more difficult, especially when we have inflation going on right now, the amount of money we're already paying on these contracts because we're seeing 20 to 40% increases? And do we want to eliminate people from bidding? Because all that's going to do is make things more expensive, and we're going to have less bidders out there. We're not going to be growing Vermont's economy. We're not going to be supporting these small contractors and working with the state of Vermont. And our goal is to hopefully grow those contractors over time. So I do think this is extremely damaging. And I thank you for taking this up in this committee.
Do you have enough bidders now?
No, we have plenty of instances, and we're happy to come in and report to you because we keep track. We have lots of different ways in which we hire people. So we do have people under retainer, which means I may have 5 contractors that can fix your window. There's lots of situations where I put out to retainer, I don't get anyone. We also do standard bid, right, where I put it out to everyone. And we've had plenty of instances in the last year and a half where we have nobody bidding, to the point where we're working with the Agency of Administration on certain types of contractors to be able to direct solicit where we can't get people to bid. So we're looking for that flexibility for today, because for today we have a problem and we have all the data. So if you want specific data on the contracts we've been putting out and people not bidding, happy to bring that back to the committee.
Do you think this is gonna cost the money, the state could this possibly cost the state more money by this law? Could it possibly cause the state more money by not having enough bidders?
I absolutely do, because I think it's going to reduce competition, and with reduced competition, prices go up.
Questions?
You already anticipated mine, as did the commissioner, yeah. If this went through, to me, it seems, and I try to understand economics a little bit, that we would be encouraging single bidder or single vendor bidding or none. And neither, I don't think, puts the state in a more advantageous position.
It does not. And again, the auditor can at any time come to BGS, which may happen at this point, come anytime to BGS and say, I want to audit, I want to audit BGS's process on X, Y, and Z. Well, I will tell you, it's why it makes people nervous to come in and testify, just to be totally honest.
Oh, I hear that.
So he can come in just like he did in 2016, and he can audit several of our contracts. And we would work with him to go through that process. But the only other thing that I'll mention, and I've worked with the auditor before, and this is not to pick on anybody, but it was important in that audit to have BGS involved, because we have technical expertise that they don't have in the auditor's office. So for them to go directly to a vendor and they don't have the technical expertise, there's a lot of questions that they ask, and they're great questions. They are absolutely fantastic questions that need to be answered, but they need the right people in the room helping to answer those questions. So a good one that came up from the auditor, awesome question: why do building projects have so many change orders? And when I came from VTrans, because they tend to keep them lower there is a huge difference between the transportation sector and the building sector. How many times have you opened up a wall? This happened in my house today because I flooded over the weekend, where you open up a wall, right? Let's say I plan to put a window in this wall. I'm going to open up this wall, and there's going to be a bunch of damage that I didn't know was there.
Right.
And as a result of that, right, an unforeseen condition, there's going to be a change order for that work because it was not anticipated, right? When I said I want to put a window in this wall. And that happens all the time in our homes. So it was a great question by the auditor, but it was really important that BGS was in the room when responding to that question, because they don't have the technical expertise to understand why building projects tend to have more change orders, let's say, than transportation. So there's value in making sure that it's going through the agents of the state, which in this case is the agency, department, or state institution.
Thank you.
Glad we had this. Really great. I'm concerned also about the medical department. That's a big concern. When you got so many, we got enough issues there trying to get people to work.
Exactly.
That's really, Senator Lyon was concerned about that, and I can see why. I didn't understand it before.
Anything from the side?
And Debbie's always good about filling in where I.
Thank you for the opportunity, but this team did a fantastic job. We're very passionate about this. We're on the front lines every single day and support everything that was said here.
We have some folks on the screen. Does anybody have anything to add that they'd like to add, or I see Senator Renner, you good?
I'm good. Thank you. Very informative.
Eric, are you good?
I have nothing to add, Mr. Chairman.
Melissa Jackson?
She's with the next hearing.
Okay, she's the next one, and
Asa and
there was the next hearing,
Stephen also.
and Stephen is, okay. Well, yes.
So, Mr. Chair, Matt Musgrave for the record from AGC, just was reflecting on the question that you asked me earlier. Do contractors have any fear over this? And while we don't have conversations about bidding, whether to bid or not to bid, I can use an example that's close and dear to me. It has nothing to do with the auditor, as a matter of fact. We turned down a contract from AOT today at the Associated General Contractors. It was a pretty simple contract to do some pretty simple training, and there was a 70-page addendum that was attached to a simple training document, just so that we could train people on how to be safe when they're dealing with gravel and pits. And there was 70 pages attached to it that had restrictions, it had requirements, and it had certifications that were completely not germane to our organization in any way, shape, or form. So we had to have taken that relative, it was a very low cost contract. We would have had to do more work to our building, more work and certifications and those requirements than we would have earned, as a matter of fact, from the contract. So we turned that down. It had nothing to do with the contractor. Other examples, there's a bridge in Quechee. I know that bid was brought back in because they weren't able to get a satisfactory number of bids on it. There's a Cherry Street building that I believe is now for sale, as a matter of fact, because they had a very high bid with a low number of bidders on it. So where I'm not suggesting anything in particular to Phil, I'm saying in general, it is very frustrating and complicated to do contracts with the state, and savvy organizations like my members have people that are specialized in doing it. They have on-staff counsel to deal with situations, whether it's an audit or other things. So, and no offense to BGS, right?
That's fine.
These are oftentimes federal requirements that are built into these addendas. So wherever we can make it easier for the contractor, that's a good thing. When we add more restrictions, more regulations, regardless of what the intention is, we have to think about that thoughtfully as the commissioner and everyone else in the room is.
So you tend to, not to characterize what you do, Matt, but you tend to represent some bigger firms. And I've heard from a lot of those. And I've also heard from some smaller ones. And I'm going to go back to Deputy Farnham's a comment about wanting to do more business with BIPOC, the smaller firms. And I think the call that most resonated with me out of all the ones I've got was the one contractor. You probably recognize it before it's all said and done. I'm gonna make sure that you don't as best I can. He said that listen, we do a contract about every 3 years and it's nice. And we're not big enough to do a lot of those contracts, but the ones that we bid on, we tend to get because they're smaller, and we're thankful. We're thankful for the work. We're thankful for everything. Love working with the state, with the people. Yes, it's hard. They all do say it's not easy to work with the state, but we appreciate it. It's an honest process. But if we were to get audited, we are going to have to go hire people. It's just like if we were audited by the IRS. We're going to have to hire people to get us through this process. We're so small. And I think that's the part, Deputy, that bothers me the most, is that we could exclude people, minorities from being able to contract with the state, and that just bothers the hell out of me. It just does. It just bothers me that people just trying to get started are going to get excluded from these companies that are just trying to get a foothold and should have every opportunity to be able to come in here and bid on those works and expect that they're going to be treated fairly, and that just bothers me. Anything else that anybody like to add? I want to thank everybody. I really do. I think it was very helpful. I appreciate everybody coming in and for what you've added, and I think it's very, very helpful to the process. And I can't thank you enough for coming in and taking the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Well, you used to be there, so you know what I'm talking about. Not there anymore.
Okay, guys, I think we can probably just kind of,
So
yep, go ahead.
are we?
We got one more section. We got some
No, I
folks online.
understand. So
Yep.
are we going to talk about this more?
Yeah, we'll talk about it after. Let's let these folks that are in already, and let's, everybody good to just continue on and just get this going? Okay, because we have folks here, so yes, we will talk about it
Yeah.
more.
Just want to know.
Yep.
We won't resolve it
No, we won't. Thank you, folks.
Yeah.
Just give us a second here. We're gonna get you right in. Okay, guys, we got governor's recommend section 16. Let's just get all prepared for that after. Yep. Let me just get right over here. You got that? Okay. Section 16. 12, 15, 16. Okay. There we go. I'm gonna pull it up in my book as well. Elevator and boiler.
Not a B next to it.
Oh, yeah, that's me.
I mean, Baltimore. those, I had the right beginning letter.
He's so popular. Notice all the letters he gets.
Oh, yeah.
It's unbelievable. What a guy, what a senator. Wow.
Because you respond.
Oh, it's just
Okay.
unbelievable.
I gotta start in the morning.
Are we good? Everybody ready to go? Yep. Well, thank you, everybody. We appreciate it very much. We're going to continue on section 16, FYI 24-25 capital budget proposal for Vermont Veterans Home. And who wants to lead off with the conversation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will. I am Melissa Jackson. I am the CEO of the Vermont Veterans Home. I want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Welcome.
We appreciate you doing it via Zoom. It's not that we don't enjoy our drive to Montpelier, but we get a lot more done this way.
We understand that.
I just wanted to start quickly by updating a project that this committee has previously funded for us, and that is our safety and security project. That was state capital funds of $920,000. And the Veterans Administration is footing the bill for the remaining $1.68 million of that project. And that project is finally moving forward, was delayed due to COVID. We've replaced most of our exterior doors. We've installed emergency call boxes in our parking lot. We are about 75% complete in our wiring for card access throughout the facility. 40% of our interior doors have been replaced, and we are looking forward to completing this project between May and June. So I wanted to give you an update on that. That's finally moving.
Actually, Senator Harrison was just asking if we ever did get updates on that. So Senator Harrison, there you go. We do once in a while.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Just, pardon me, just one second.
Yeah.
Is there a website or something I can look at? I just don't even know what the Veterans Home looks like or where it is.
So, okay, we are in Bennington, and it's vvh.vermont.gov.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And some other great news.
Go ahead. Sorry, I
That's
jumped in.
okay.
I apologize.
No, and some other great news, as if there was anything good that came out of COVID, the VA found some grant funding that did not require state match. So as a state veterans home, we are able to apply for VA grant funding. And normally when the grant is approved, the VA pays for 65% of the project, and they require the state to pay for 35% of the project. So we leverage that opportunity anytime we can. But during COVID, they realized that most states did not have matching funds. And we were able to apply for a grant that totals about $16 million to renovate one of our wings entirely with no requirement of state funds.
Melissa, and I should have done this right from the beginning. I apologize.
That's fine.
Brand new committee, and to be fair, I've got some desire to know as well.
Okay.
Tell us what you do. Tell us what you do. So,
sure.
Yes.
So first and foremost, we're an agency of the state of Vermont. We're always asked, where do you fall into the grand picture of things? So we are a state agency. We have the honor and privilege of caring for Vermont veterans, their spouses, and Gold Star parents. We line up very nicely with the governor's goal of caring for Vermont's most vulnerable. So we provide long-term care, short-term rehab, and we have a very small assisted living, all on 84 acres, 140,000 square feet, one-level facility here in Bennington, complete with a deer park, an airsoft pistol and rifle range, golf carts. So they want go-karts. No, it's a phenomenal place. We invite you down anytime. I know you guys are very busy during the legislative season, but if you're in Bennington, nights, weekends, holidays, let us know. I'll be more than happy to show you around. It is an incredible place. The care is top notch. We are a 5-star rated Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Service nursing facility. That's the highest rating you can achieve. We are the only one in Bennington County and only one of 7 in the state to achieve that honor. So our staff is phenomenal. our staff are state employees as well. We're always asked that question.
So
How
do you,
many,
go ahead, yeah.
how many clients do you have now? Because that population-
So, yep, we are licensed to have 130 nursing home beds. We have 25 beds that we are not filling due to the healthcare shortage. So we have 105 beds that we can fill. We have 100 of those beds filled, and our assisted living is 8 beds, and 7 of those beds are filled. And we have a very long waiting list.
The vast majority of the beds are for care and trying to transition them elsewhere after that. I mean, you're not doing the long-term care in the vast majority of the beds. Is that correct?
No, we do. Our vast majority is long-term care.
Okay, so it is. Okay.
Yep.
So you're not so much as a hospital as you are a care facility, and providing housing for veterans who need housing. And
yeah, we're predominantly a nursing home. That's what our 130 beds are, and then our 8 beds would are licensed as what's called residential care, but it's easier to describe as assisted living.
Okay, fair enough. And they have the ability to function somewhat on their own with some oversight from you folks.
Those in the assisted living, yes.
Yep.
Yes. We have a couple that drive and go away for the weekend and come back.
Oh,
So,
no
yeah.
kidding. Yeah,
Yeah.
very nice.
Yeah.
So what else?
So we would like to talk about our requests in the capital budget.
Yeah.
First and foremost, I want to say that for each of these projects, we're asking for the total dollar amount, but we are actively applying for VA funding for these projects. In the past, we have the committee and the state legislature has fully funded projects for us. And then when the VA pays their 65%, we return that money to the state of Vermont. So the first one of these projects is our boiler plant and our emergency generator program. So this project totals $405 million. We recently had a heating feasibility study done. We have oil boilers in our facility that are at the end of their useful life and also are too large for this facility. Just prior to my arrival in 2011, the facility transitioned over to a geothermal system. And the boilers for the 140,000 square foot facility remained in place. They are steam boilers. They are not energy efficient. So we would like to replace those with propane boilers. We anticipate that project costing about $2.5 million. We also have realized on those very rare cold days, like we had a few weeks ago with the wind chill, it was minus 45 degrees here in Bennington. Our geothermal system does not have enough emergency backup to handle those types of temperature swings. So as we do this boiler work, we would be able to add additional emergency heat and allow our geothermal system to run a little bit more efficiently. The cost of that project, along with improving our hot water, is approximately $1.9 million. And then the last little bit is to replace an old diesel generator that is at the end of its useful life. Now, I realize fossil fuels are not a great topic to have. I know that the state is looking towards more renewable energy. We were asked in House institutions why we're not looking at a battery backup generator. And due to the regulatory requirements of a nursing facility, we need a diesel generator that can carry the full load of our facility 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that is why a diesel generator is being looked at.
Yep, understand.
Is that a federal requirement, Melissa?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any specific questions on that project?
No, makes sense to me.
No, fair enough. So as far as the work, we have Joe Asia in the room as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we just wanting to make sure that we understand how the process works. Does BGS become involved with all of these projects?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and so you're down there, just like if it was anywhere else in the other buildings, you're down there helping with the bid process and all of that, so just like everything else that we do.
For the capital bill line items, that is correct.
Okay,
The home can opt out if they want to, but basically we are there to help them through all these items.
Yep.
That we have for many years.
okay, thank you. What's next, Melissa?
So I'd like to talk about our elevator project and the dehumidification of our basement. So despite being 140,000 square feet, one level predominantly, we do have a very small second floor for administration, and we do have a basement. And we have 2 elevators in the building that are beyond their useful life, and we cannot get replacement parts for them. Matter of fact, the manufacturers have gone out of business. So before one or both fail indefinitely or permanently, we would like to look at upgrading those, vice totally replacing them. And Joe can articulate far better than I can what the difference between the two is. So I'm going to ask if he would do that for me.
What was that question again, Melissa? Because I was multitasking.
Sorry, I was asking you to explain the difference, how we can upgrade the elevator versus having to replace it in its entirety.
Thank you. There's a thing called the modernization for an elevator out there in the elevator world. And what that does is it comes in and replaces a lot of the motors, the guts, the inside panels, but leaves, like if it's a traction elevator, it leaves the cables. They can reuse those unless they have to be done. The rails, if it's a piston elevator, the hydraulics and all that stays the same. So there's certain things that the type of elevator it is and what really has to be done to it, you can go one way or the other. Rarely is it a complete replacement. So there are benefits to a modernization that comes in and looks just like a
All shaft, everything is there.
Yeah, so
that is exactly true.
So this is gonna fit all your ADA compliances, your elevator's already large enough, it's already got capacity enough. You're just gonna come in and you're just gonna retrofit it.
So it could be that depending on the age of the elevator, the buttons could be too high. The new elevator will have the right height, all that good stuff, both inside and or outside of the car. Some of it also requires a code is changed where on the inside, you're supposed to be able to see the floor that you're on, and same with the outside, it has on the elevator door jamb, it has the floor number you're on, stuff like that. So all that comes into play when replacing an elevator, whether it's a modernization or new, but it's not a complete new elevator.
So a complete off the topic question. What elevator company has gone out of business? Because I had a great relative who founded the Houghton elevators, but Otis is the other one that I always hear about.
Otis is still around, and they purchased Bay State 4 years ago or something like that. It used to be well known in the Northeast out of Boston, everything like that.
Bay State.
Yeah.
This is owned by UTC now. They own Sikorsky and a bunch of, yeah.
Which is good, because it means they won't go into business. But it's bad because they're the only game in town and they're expensive. Yeah, we did an elevator at one of my
They
towns.
don't like
It
attachment
was
C.
crazy. Well, there aren't repair people. That's really the problem that we found.
They are having issues. We just, even though they're union and they're highly paid, they're still having trouble with finding employees. And I think because of it, some are starting their own up, and we just renewed our contract with Otis, and they used to have the whole state, and now they have half, and we have another firm doing the other half to see if that helps us out.
Yeah, we had base. No matter what you pay, they're not there.
Correct.
So Melissa, for the FY '24, it looks like you're asking for, well, we got $5.5 million for you. Is that your understanding as well?
That is correct, yes.
And I would just say, I've been telling people, we have a new function on the capital bill this year. It's called a cash fund. We started it last year, and this year we've got a fairly sizable amount in there. have cautioned people along the way that that cash fund might not be there, depending on how anxious everybody gets down here to raise taxes to start new programs, but you're on the bonded dollars. So I think you're probably pretty safe. So
Good to hear.
I would say that, looking at how it's there, I think we're pretty safe with the $5.5 million. Is there anything else that you'd like to add with us today?
Just also in addition with the elevator upgrade, there is some money in that request to continue to monitor our basement humidity. One of the unique things about the veterans home, obviously, is we have a geothermal system because we're built on an underground lake.
Yeah.
So Senator Mazza can tell you, we've had multiple conversations and the state has been generous with capital bonding dollars to keep mold out of that basement.
I know we've done a lot in the basement.
So one of the things we have noticed is that there's still a need for some dehumidification, as well as there's parts of the basement that are basically very tight crawl spaces. So we want to put dehumidification as well as moisture alarms in some of those areas that are hard to access to continue to make sure that we don't have a mold issue. So those funds are included in this request under the elevator project as well.
Okay.
There is, Mr. Chair, 1.5 for FY '25.
I see
It
that.
is out of the cash fund.
Yeah, that is, and I didn't want to scare her into, I didn't want to get ahead of myself, so that's why I kind of said, well, we'll worry about 24 for right now, and
Okay.
we'll see how 25 goes. And we'll probably be talking about that next year, obviously. But for right now, I think the 5.5 we have in there, historically, if it's bonded dollars, you're usually pretty safe. So we'd like to, we don't want to go against precedent, so we're gonna tell you we think you're pretty safe.
Thank you. And again, we'll definitely be applying for VA grant funding. I am the boiler plant, because we've actually have some safety citations. I'm fairly confident that will be funded fairly quickly. The elevator work, I'm not sure how quickly the VA will be able to fund that and turn the dollars around. And just one additional challenge for us as we do use VA funding, our projects are going to come in a little bit more on the higher side, because under a VA grant program, we have to follow the president's executive order of Buy America, Build America, where all parts and pieces must be made in America. Anything that's permanently affixed to the building. So speaking to my colleagues, their RFPs are coming in substantially higher now than they were in the past.
I haven't heard anything coming in lower the last.
You would have shocked us.
I wish I could say that, but But even after you take into account for inflation, they're still seeing us coming in substantially higher, even 25-30% more than they would have anticipated. So I want that, I've always been very frank with the committee.
Melissa, do you know where the names for the nursing units came from? When I saw Brandon, I thought you meant we had a new building in Brandon, Vermont somewhere. Cardinal, where do those names come from?
So that's a combination of staff choosing the names of the neighborhoods as they were built or reconstructed, or staff. So they were all named before I arrived. So it's a combination thereof.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Committee, what else? Do we have any more questions?
Thank you. Good job.
I would love to take you up on your offer to come down and tour that facility sometime. I want to thank you for who you're taking care of down there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's I just appreciate that very, very much. But yeah, I'd like to come down and see you sometime. So
anytime. And thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
You have anything else for us?
I actually want to do a quick introduction.
Please do.
Asa Morin is our not so new COO. For those of you who've been on the committee for a while, I used to bring Al Faxon with me. He was our retired Marine and our former COO. He retired. Asa has been with the facility for many years. She was initially one of our social workers and was an internal promotion, great promotion to the COO position. And Steve McClafferty has been my finance director for 11 years. Those of you on the committee probably recognize Steve, but I just wanted to introduce who the two quiet people in the corners of my screen were.
Well, I don't know how they, with this committee, they'd get a word in edgewise anyway. So anyways, we appreciate it, and it's nice to meet you folks, and appreciate you coming in.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
Take care.
Bye.
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 Well, that was
Yeah,
spot on.
yeah. So committee, why we're here, and I think we had a lot of information given to us on the last presentation before this one, and
I'm very, very surprised. I mean, they make a lot of sense that people testified today. I had no knowledge of what really the ramifications that would cause. It's amazing. I guess I'm surprised also that the chair was reluctant to have anybody else look at this bill, because I think it affects more than one committee. And I think health and welfare is going to state that. When I heard from the nursing, I didn't realize that it had an impact on.
Devin Green, yeah, nurses.
Wow, that's huge. We don't need any roadblocks in that field. So there was some good testimony today on that bill. I like I said, what happened the other day on the floor was not good. And there are other committees that are involved in this decision. It's not just one, because it affects a lot of people. I had no idea until I heard this today. It's very beneficial, I thought.
does the committee feel like we need to, does anybody want to hear from anybody else that we didn't hear from today? Go ahead.
I'd like to hear from the auditor or someone who's in favor of the bill, basically.
Well, as far as I understood, it'll be on notice again tomorrow.
Well, I think they're gonna pass over it. I think
Okay.
we're gonna have till Thursday.
All right.
And
Jenny's very concerned about it.
Okay.
She's very concerned about it. But she got into it about, now I understand why, because that lady was here. And that's a big, I was amazed to think that what the ramifications, and the last thing we need for hospitals to have, that's, they're clamoring for help, we know, whether it's a medical center, Burlington, or Brooklyn, or whatever it is. So just don't want to do something that's damaging. That's all. Sometimes these quiet little bills, you don't have to, and all of a sudden you get into them, and they're very damaging to the state, which you don't think about, because some of these things, like, that's what was kind of upsetting when I got confronted with, that's my bill where nobody's touching it. Well, that's not always true. There's a lot of people involved.
But it's just the level of phone calls that I got, again, I mean, we're used to now because of S5, getting a lot of contacts, but my phone blew up, and there's a lot of people that were scared. I mean, there was a lot of people that said, you guys are there, we're nervous, we're just nervous to come in. And so who can you get in to advocate for us? And so I think we did a fair job with that today.
I think so too.
But I hear you, maybe we can get the auditor in, if everybody's in favor of that. And so, do you think we can?
We have tonight, tomorrow, trying to get.
someone in that.
Tim, whoever wants to come in, I mean, from the auditor's office, maybe we can get them in. Anybody else? Anybody else that you guys didn't hear from? Irene, how are you feeling? I mean, I know you're not feeling well, but sorry about that. But anybody you want to hear from, or any comments from today that you want to add in, or?
I was surprised, so I was glad they came in. I can read what the auditor said, but there's nothing like meeting with him, so I'd like to bring him in.
Okay, you're good with that?
Yeah, thanks.
How's the weather in Florida, all right?
She wishes.
I wish. I've been watching it snow all my winter.
Yeah, there's a few of you out with COVID, but you all look like you're in the same room. So come on, tell us the truth. What's going on? What do we miss?
Gotta keep you laughing.
Yeah. So okay, so then what we'll have to do is hear from the auditor, and then we'll have to make a decision on whether we want to try to make something as a committee decision or an individual decision. I'm gonna leave that up to all of you guys when it's all said and done. So we're gonna try to get the auditor in tomorrow, Linda?
Yep.
Okay.
And it's very helpful to know more.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Okay. Well, unless anybody else has anything, Mr. Philborn, you have anything for us?
I'm fine.